Hello, everyone. I'm currently on my friend's porch. I'm not home right now recording this, so there's some belligerent blue jays making a lot of noise and a bunch of cars passing by, so bear with me on that. But today I want to talk about, and in upcoming videos, I want to talk about and focus on what feminists and women react defensively to. Particularly, what actions do men take that compel women and feminists to take retaliatory action? What offends them? Whether this retaliatory action be of the legal or social variety. What I want to do with this particular video is to examine specific instances in which feminists attempt to interfere in contractual arrangements between individuals to see whether or not feminists actually support and advocate women like I say they do. That is, being a perpetual advocacy machine for the Western woman and for women at large. I want to bring up the famous Baby M case that happened in 1986 in New Jersey as an example of this, and I'm just going to read to you briefly the Wikipedia excerpt from the description of the case. It says, quote, "Baby M was a custody case that became the first American court ruling on the validity of surrogacy. William Stern and his wife, Elizabeth Stern, entered into a surrogacy arrangement with Mary Beth Whitehead, whom they found through a newspaper advertisement. According to the agreement, Mary Beth Whitehead would be inseminated with William Stern's sperm, making her a traditional as opposed to a gestational surrogate. She would then bring the pregnancy to term and relinquish her parental rights in favor of William's wife, Elizabeth. After the birth, however, Mary Beth decided to keep the child. William and Elizabeth Stern then sued to be recognized as the child's legal parents. The New Jersey court ruled that the surrogacy contract was invalid according to public policy. It recognized Mary Beth Whitehead as the child's legal mother and ordered the family court to determine whether Whitehead as mother or Stern as father should have legal custody of the infant, using the conventional best interests of the child analysis. Stern, the father, was awarded custody, with Whitehead having visitation rights." End quote. So the father did in fact get custody, but only after the contractual arrangement was rendered invalid and the maternal claim to the child was returned to the biological mother, Mary Beth Whitehead, who was under contractual obligations to relinquish her parental rights to William and Elizabeth Stern. Now, the interesting part is that upon hearing of this case, a veritable who's who of the feminist intelligentsia of the time, including but not limited to Betty Friedan, Marilyn French, and Gloria Steinem, decided to draft an amicus brief in opposition of the Sterns gaining custody of baby M, citing, not surprisingly, the possibility of the exploitation of women. The brief, which is linked in the description box, read as follows, or at least a portion of it did. Quote, "We invalidate the surrogacy contract because it conflicts with the law and public policy of this state. While we recognize the depth of the yearning of infertile couples to have their own children, we find the payment of money to a surrogate mother illegal, perhaps criminal, and potentially degrading to women." End quote. And this happened in 1986, almost 3 decades ago. But, I did some searching and I found several feminist groups currently expressing the same opinions towards surrogacy, pretty much the same exact opinion. Namely, one group from what's arguably the feminist capital of the world, that is Sweden. And the article that led me to their website, titled "European Women's Lobby Members Campaign Against Surrogate Motherhood," stated the following in regards to surrogacy. It said, quote, "The Swedish Women's Lobby has, together with several Swedish women's organizations, launched a new website against surrogacy. The website Feminist No to Surrogacy is a politically and religiously independent campaign that takes a strong standpoint against surrogacy on feminist grounds. The campaign supported the resolution adopted by the European Parliament in April of 2011, stating that surrogacy is an exploitation of the woman's body and her reproductive organs. The website includes a manifesto of the most important standpoints against surrogacy, alongside a blog and debate articles on the matter." End quote. And so if you read this manifesto, it's not surprisingly an exercise pretty much purely in victim mentality and female privilege. Now, I'm paraphrasing here because this is translated from Swedish. And anyone wishing, by the way, to translate this website more thoroughly, the link is in the description box. But the basic points of the manifesto opposing surrogacy were as follows. It mentions the right to abortion, and I can only assume that the reason for doing so is to imply that a surrogacy contract with some sort of non-abortion clause is an infringement on a woman's right to control over her own body. This, of course, is not applicable since nobody's going to strap a woman in one of these contracts down to a table and force her to give birth. She will have the option to abort the baby, but if she does, what will most likely happen is a financial penalty will be exacted on her. It's exactly the same thing as when a TV star has to sign a contract to not give away the details or content of a show before each episode airs. This is far from a violation of his or her free speech, but an agreement between two consenting parties to not discuss it. A contractually binding agreement. If he breaks this agreement, then he is penalized financially for doing so. The manifesto continues by making the point that, quote, women are not containers and children are not commodities, end quote. And then further down, it continues by saying, no one has a right to children, but children do have a right to their parents. You know, the sheer audacity of such a comment coming from a feminist organization is just staggering, really. Feminists and women at large are more than happy to use divorce laws to treat children as nothing more than commodities and assets to be divvied up like poker chips and to be used as leverage to deny these children their right to their fathers. And then the fact that they can sit back and say that children have a right to their parents. I mean, how many divorcing women are currently, pretty much in every Western country of the world, depriving a child's right to see their father every single day? You see, it's instances like this that prove to me that feminism is, as I've said all along, nothing more than an advocacy machine for women. Women keep the votes flowing. They are the medium by which millions of dollars in government aid can be extracted. They are the raw material for the victimhood industrial complex. And feminists provide to women protection and a get-out-of-obligation-free card for all of female society. The goal is simple, really, when you look at it. Feminists do not want men to minimize the control women have over the child-making process. Somebody must provide for women at all levels of society and in all facets of society, and if you're a man of sufficient financial means who is interested in what's quite literally, let's face it, renting out a woman's womb, you will be legislated against by multiple political entities acting on behalf of the female gender. Now, for the man interested in such an arrangement, certain inherent benefits to doing so become immediately apparent. You can potentially sidestep what will amount to at least 18 years of providing for a wife, also known in the manosphere as an adult child, that's included in the total cost of having children by impregnating a woman anywhere in the Western world. There's simply no way around it. If you impregnate a woman here in the Western world, she will have at least 2 decades of financial leverage against you, and if she wishes to use that leverage, she can take one of either two paths. She can rely on the cultural expectation for the man to be the breadwinner of the household, rendering her completely financially dependent on you. And so I Googled the average cost of living in America for the year 2013 and got a figure of $4,886 per month for a family of 2 parents and 3 children. So using this as a template, there are 5 people in the family, and 4,886 divided by 5 gives us a figure of $977 per month per member of the household. So at this point, we can make the argument that the wife spends less on average than the children. This is doubtful if you ask me, considering the shoes and the candles and all the other useless baubles and crap that she'll probably fill up your house with and call decorations. But let's just assume that this is true. And so we'll shave off $200 extra a month and call this the average cost of maintaining a stay-at-home mother. So that gives us $777 per month, or $9,326 per year. So if she stays home raising the kids for 10 years before returning to work, if she ever does, then that tallies up to a total of $93,000 you'll cough up just to support her in that period of time. And if she stays the full 18 years, you can expect to pay more than $167,000 over that time period. So in comparison, the cost of surrogacy in India is around $30,000 USD. And so that's less than a fifth of the $167,000 needed for sustaining a Western woman child. So from a purely economic standpoint, it's a winning proposition, especially for a man that can rely on extended family for childcare. And as with any technology, the price is only going to go down with time and use. But I want to go back to addressing the second potential path she can take, and that's the path of state-sponsored extraction of your wealth. Now, as you all know, reproducing with a woman in any Western nation allows that woman, if she so chooses, to work within a legal framework instead of a cultural one to deprive you of your resources. And this, too, can be completely avoided with the surrogacy contract. Granted, of course, that it was legal. So I think this does explain why feminists would try to interfere with two individuals privately drawing up a contract, trading money for a womb rental. This kind of contract cheapens the primacy of motherhood over infant life, and the only possible price that can be negotiated for infant life that can be allowed is, as much as possible, really. Anything less, anything that feminists deem not high enough, and they'll seek to intervene. And so we can't have something like surrogacy becoming popular, because somebody better be taking care of the woman having these children. And if men aren't willing to do it, feminists want a situation where they can instead decide to get them through child support. And not surprisingly either, it's not just feminists. It's conservatives that are guilty of pretty much the same exact thing, really. The only difference is they just cite, the sanctity of the family as their reason for doing it. A case in point, we can take conservative Tim Pawlenty, who vetoed a gestational surrogacy bill in 2008, stating the following. He said, quote, "The bill fails in any manner to recognize or protect the life and rights of the unborn child. The unborn child is treated throughout the bill as a chattel, the rights over which are set and enforced under the terms of a contract. Indeed, if a dispute arises under the contract or a breach occurs, the courts are prevented from applying the normal, quote, best interests of the child standard for resolving the dispute. Instead, the courts are required to apply a contract standard to determine the original intent of the contracting parties," end quote. So it's interesting. Here we have a conservative politician using his powers of legislation, citing the oft-repeated feminist axiom of the best interests of the child we so often see misused and abused in the family courts, to invalidate a private contract between consenting adults. It just doesn't get much more free market than that, does it? And in 2012, we have another well-known conservative politician, this time Chris Christie, vetoing a similar bill, stating the following. "Permitting adults to contract with others regarding a child in such a manner unquestionably raises serious and significant issues. While some will applaud the freedom to explore these new and sometimes necessary arranged births, others will note the profound change in the traditional beginnings of a family that this bill would enact. I am not satisfied that these questions have been sufficiently studied by the legislator at this time. Validating contracts for the birth of children is a step that cannot be taken without the most serious inquiry, reflection, and consensus. As those steps have not occurred, accordingly, I herewith return Senate Bill number 1599. Now, I pose to you a question. Since when have supposedly conservative politicians been in the business of legislating their morality and their vision of what the ideal traditional beginnings of a family should be? I was under the impression that the right wanted government out of our lives. I was under the impression that in a free and open society, the individual can decide for him or herself what the ideal family looks like. And if an individual wishes to start a family via the methods of surrogacy, then what business is that of the government? It's free and open society, period. Not free and open so long as we don't violate some politician's idea of what a family should be. It's free and open, period. The conclusion that I come to when I see things like this is that somehow, some way, society will always bail out women. If women are under any kind of threat, any politician will go back on his word for any number of reasons until women are no longer under that threat. It's that simple. And of course, you'll see conservatives pay lip service to, for example, decreasing welfare spending programs. But the day that single mothers start getting tossed out onto the street after their welfare and WIC and food stamps run out, you'll see these conservative politicians change their tune real fast. And I want to go back to this point about the traditional family. When you hear this type of talk, what you need to do is learn to read between the lines. What you're really hearing is we don't want men to be able to raise children without women. That's what it all boils down to. Some way, somehow, women have to be taken care of by men if men wish to reproduce at all. A man that wishes to reproduce and not take care of the women he reproduced with is simply not allowed. Either you'll hear some jazz about how men should take care of women via traditionalism, or you'll hear feminists demanding that politicians, both liberal and conservative, strike down any legislation attempting to make this possible for men. And in fact, to my knowledge, we don't even really know the potential effects of large-scale single fatherhood on society, because no society in history, to my knowledge, has ever even allowed it. Of course, though, they've allowed plenty of single motherhood. And so one could say that you have that to point to as an example of what single fatherhood would look like. But since when have trends in female behavior been necessarily analogous to trends in male behavior? Does female in-group preference automatically mean that men also have an in-group preference? Of course it doesn't. So it follows that single fatherhood need not have the same detrimental